Hi everyone, I'm Matthew Bateman. This is the New Old Catholic Family. So sorry for the late video. Since I put out the trailer video, I literally contracted coronavirus. So where I intended to publish this a week or two after the trailer, I was postponed. So today's the first video. Today's topic is, what is the gospel? What's the Catholic perspective on the gospel? I thought I'd start from square one, ask the best question first. So if you are a Protestant watching this video, I'm posting it to show and to demonstrate and to share the hope that Catholics believe in the gospel. There's sometimes some misinformation or misunderstanding that they don't, but they do. Catholics believe in the gospel. I love the gospel. Our hope is in Jesus Christ, crucified and risen on the third day. If you're a Catholic and you're watching this video, maybe you've been asking some deeper questions. Maybe, like many different types of Christians, you too found yourself in a pew on Sunday because that's what your family did and that's just what you do. But there has yet to be a deeper resonance or affection in your life. There hasn't been a depth or realization yet, and so you're asking big questions. And if that's the case, then welcome. I'd love to share the gospel with you. And if you are a non-Christian, then welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'd love to share the gospel with you because we all need it. I need it. So before we get started, just wanted to say, if you find yourself bleeding out and you've got 30 seconds left to live, the gospel that I would share with you would be a lot different from these 3 or 4 videos that I'm going to publish on the gospel, since I've got all the time to share it and I don't have to rush to tell it to you. So deep, important questions deserve deep, important answers. So bear with me as I take my time to dig deep into the question of what is the gospel, why is it important, why is it necessary, why does it matter? And last thing before we get started, the gospel is not something merely academic. The beauty of the gospel is that it's simple enough that the head knowledge you need to be saved could fit on a sticky note. The wisest and saintliest of sages still ponder at the mystery of God and still come up lacking knowledge and needing faith, and yet the simplest of the simple, the humblest of the humble, the childliest of the children can still access it, can still apprehend it, can still understand it and wield it and love it and know it. But the gospel is not something merely academic. But I want my viewers to know that this video is going to get a little academic in places. The reason why is because there is no gospel if there is no God. There is no gospel without God. And so I'm going to try to demonstrate, the gospel is a lot more. It's much more than merely, is there a God or not? The gospel is Jesus Christ crucified and risen for the forgiveness of our sins. But like I said, there is no gospel if there is no God. And a lot of people misunderstand that it's all a big leap of faith, or that faith and reason are at odds with one another. And so I want to demonstrate for my viewers how reasonable it is to believe in God, and how necessary it is that there be a God for certain hope and meaning in our lives. So that's why I just wanted to preface this with, this video in particular will get a little bit academic, certainly more academic than some of my other videos. But without further ado, let's jump into it. What is the gospel? Hi, I'm Matthew Bateman. This is the New Old Catholic Family. So, I was raised in the Protestant South my entire life, and I've heard many people say many times in many different ways something to the effect of, I know there's a God. Don't tell me there's no God. I know He's real. I know He's there. And when I hear people say that, because I'm on Team Christianity, I really sympathize and relate to and appreciate their passion and their conviction. But to find common ground, especially with non-believers, is my personal belief that the hiddenness of God, the mystery of God, is an integral part of His plan. I think that God intends to remain mysterious, especially after the fall, and that he doesn't will to bash us over the head with irrefutable proof of his existence, but that although faith and blind faith are not at all the same thing, and although faith and reason are most definitely not at odds with one another, that God does not want to just boom up and reveal himself. Seek and you shall find. That's an if-then statement. If you seek, you will find, and in order to find, you have to seek. So there has to be a component of faith involved, somewhere integral in God's will. But I want to start, like I said, with why I think belief in God is very reasonable. So, there's an argument that goes something like this. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. And if the universe is material, then the cause of the universe has to be immaterial, or something greater than mere matter. If the universe is intelligible, then the cause of the universe has to have intelligibility. It has to be immensely intelligent, greater than the knowledge contained within the universe. If the universe is something within time and bound to time, then the cause of the universe has to be greater than time, not bound by time, and beyond time. So what you get is something personal, immensely powerful, immensely intelligent, spaceless, immaterial, and beyond time. And that sounds an awful lot like God to the Christian. Now let me go back to everything that begins to exist has a cause. You may have heard that argument put less articulately as everything that exists has a cause. And when people hear that, when any fourth grader who's a deep thinker hears that, they can and should retort with, wait a minute, if everything that exists has a cause, well, you say God exists, what caused God? So let me clarify again, I am not saying everything that exists has a cause. I am saying everything that begins to exist has a cause. Now someone might hear that and they might think that it's dodgy or sidestepping, being kind of cheeky or exercising some kind of sophistry to allow God as some sort of exception to the rule. But that's actually not quite the case. It's perfectly fine, and it's not special pleading to say everything that begins to exist has a cause. And I'd like to put forth some reasons why that's perfectly sound and reasonable. The first one is things that begin to exist do in fact require a cause. Things do not pop in and out of existence randomly. The second reason is because things cannot cause themselves to be, but something outside of itself has to be. The third reason is because the universe is not eternal, and an infinite regress of causes is absurd and requires a first cause, itself uncaused, in order to defeat the absurdity of an infinite regress. And I'm going to pause on those first 3 points that I gave and elaborate on those. So the first one was, things that begin to exist do in fact require a cause outside themselves. Things don't pop willy-nilly into existence. And this was proven in the Middle Ages. There was a false idea called spontaneous generation, and it is exactly what it sounds like. People didn't have refrigerators. They had their meat sitting out on the shelf or whatever, and they'd come back a few hours later or the next day and notice that there were maggots crawling on it. Well, they didn't see the maggots arrive there, crawl up to it. It just seemed like there they were. So the idea was spontaneous generation. Well, sometimes things just come into existence. But scientific tests showed, we have two pieces of meat here. One of them we cover with a clear glass dish so nothing can get in or out. The other one we leave to the open air. And lo and behold, the one that was uncovered had maggots on it a while later. The one that was covered in the glass dish did not. So the idea was clearly refuted that things do not just pop into being. They do require a cause, and they do require a cause outside of themselves. Someone hearing this might retort, and I am not a physicist, I'm not a scientist, I'm a very amateur theologian. I majored in religious studies and minored in philosophy, so it is what it is. Some people might retort with something I've heard from quantum physics, that at the quantum level, at the subatomic level, that there are particles smaller than protons and neutrons, smaller than quarks, that do seem to just pop in and out of existence. And so they'd say, aha, see? Things can begin to exist without a cause. Quantum particles do appear to be popping in and out of existence. And I would respond to that by saying, it is very possible, you look at condensation on a window. It's dry, and then all of a sudden it seems like beads of water just beat up on the window out of nowhere. Where did they come from? Well, to the naked eye, it may appear like these beads of water did just appear. But with finer instrumentation and a knowledge of how the water cycle works, we observe that with precipitation and humidity, changes in temperature, evaporation, condensation, and so forth, that water that seems to just beat up on the window is doing anything but merely popping into existence. Now, I could be wrong, I'm not a physicist, but it seems very possible to me that with as small as subatomic particles are, these subquarks, there's every real possibility that our instrumentation is just not finely tuned enough to properly understand what is going on at the subatomic level, and 50 or 100 years from now or whatever, the instrumentation may in fact show that these particles are absolutely not popping in and out of existence. Second retort. Let's say that I'm wrong, and quantum physics clearly demonstrates in the future that particles on the subatomic level do in fact pop in and out of existence. Aha, then. Things do not require a cause to begin to exist. Things can causelessly pop into being and begin to exist. I'm talking about the universe in the end. To that I would say, even if these subatomic particles on the quantum level are in fact popping in and out of existence, they are doing so within the framework of a material existence that already exists. Matter already exists. The universe already exists. Solids, liquids, gases, protons, neutrons, and electrons already exist. The laws of physics already exist. And so the laws of physics may be permitting on the quantum level for this matter that already exists to then pop in and out of existence. And so again, it seems like in fact what is not happening is something ex nihilo, that is, from nothing, literally popping in and out of existence, but that perhaps in a system where matter and the laws of physics already exist, things may be permitted on the quantum level to pop in and out of existence. I don't know. Thirdly, again, maybe quantum physics will demonstrate that tiny subatomic particles will pop in and out of existence. But we don't see this happening anywhere else. You know, germs don't, flies don't, frogs don't, people sure don't. And it seems like universes definitely do not just pop in and out of existence. So everything that begins to exist has a cause. And number one, which I'm just wrapping up addressing, a thing cannot just pop into existence, but it does in fact require a cause outside itself, to begin to exist. Number two, a thing cannot cause itself to exist. I'm not going to spend a lot of time articulating that because it's baldly obvious that a thing has to exist to cause itself to exist, but that's self-defeating because if it already existed, it wouldn't need to cause itself to exist. And if it doesn't exist, then it can't exist to cause itself to exist. So a thing can't cause itself to exist. It has to exist to do so, but then it wouldn't need to cause itself to exist, blah, 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 blah. That's really the end of that one. And number three, like I said, it turns out the universe is not eternal. Scientists, whether theist or atheist, all agree on that. The universe had a beginning. It had an origin. Perhaps people used to get away with saying that the universe was eternal, but it's not. Now, cause comes from cause comes from cause. You came from your parents, who came from your grandparents, who came from your great-grands, and onward to the first human. And planets likewise had causes. And the stars and the stardust and the explosions and the Big Bang, all of that had a cause. But we can't have an infinite regress of causes. You can't have causes that were beget by causes that were beget by causes into infinity with no first cause, itself uncaused. So number three here, I want to talk about why it's pretty patently obvious that the universe is not eternal, and give you several demonstrations of why an infinite regress of causes is absurd, and why you need a first cause, a prime cause, itself uncaused, to have the universe make sense. Now, like I said, scientists have demonstrated the expansion of the universe, blah, 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 that the universe did, in fact, have a beginning, and that it doesn't stretch on into eternity. And the universe having an eternal past, not making any sense, is pretty easy to demonstrate in this way. So you have a sun, and you have a planet like Mercury that's very close to the sun, and its circuit around the sun, its revolution, its year, is a pretty short one. Then you have a planet farther out, like Neptune. It's very far from the sun, and its circuit takes a lot longer. Now, by the time this Neptune-like planet goes around, the smaller planet has gone around several times. So if the universe is eternal, if there's an infinite regress back into the past, well, which planet has been around the sun more times? Well, it seems pretty obvious that if the closer planet with the smaller circuit goes around 5 times, for every time the farther planet goes around 1 time, it seems like no matter how long they've existed, the longer they've existed, the more times the closer planet's circuit will have been completed. 5 times to 1 time, 10 times to 2 times, and so on and so on and so on. But in fact, if the universe is infinite, if there's an infinite regress of past events, of past causes, then these 2 planets have not gone around a proportionately and exponentially larger number of times and a proportionately exponentially smaller number of times. Although that's completely reasonable, if the universe is eternal, if the universe stretches infinitely back, then in fact, these planets have both been around that sun the same number of times, namely, an infinite number of times. But on the face of it, that is just self-defeating and absurd, because no matter how long they've existed, it's just obvious that the planet with the shorter circuit has been around more and more and more times, exponentially more times, increasingly more times, than the planet with the larger circuit. So that's just completely contrary and absurd, and defeating the idea that the universe is infinite, because then those two planets would have both been around the same number of times, namely an infinite number of times. Another reason why an infinite universe, an eternal universe, does not make sense is because numbers, as a concept, are actually infinite. You've got negative numbers stretching endlessly into the past, positive numbers infinitely into the future, and even with decimals, an infinite amount of space in between 1 and 2, or in between 2 and 3, because an increasing number, an infinite number of decimal places. But if the universe and the age of the universe were likened to that number line, we wouldn't really have an infinity. We'd only have an infinity of negative numbers behind us. Think about it. We are right here, right now, on the cutting edge of the present. The future hasn't yet occurred yet. We're spiraling through time. So we're right here, right now, on the present, always counting towards something larger, but with infinity in the past. So an infinity that only stretches in one direction, but has a very finite nature here in the present, is again just absurd. It's like saying, what's infinity divided by 2, or what's infinity times 2, or what's infinity plus 1, plus 1, plus 1, with every new second. It just doesn't make sense, because infinity is infinity. So, as much as an infinite universe or an eternal universe could potentially make sense if you need something eternal, an infinitude in the past, mingled with the very finite and present moment of now, is just absurd. But mathematics and planets aside, imagine that you walk into a building with an exceedingly high ceiling, super duper skyscraper, so high you can't see the ceiling. But very near to you, there's a chandelier that you're looking at, and it's on a chain link going up and up and up, and the chain link is so high that you can't see the ceiling. Now maybe it's 1,000,000 chain links, but every reasonable person just knows, and you don't have to be told, that no matter how high up it goes, eventually that chain link must be hanging on something. There must be something that is not a chain link on which all of the chain links are hanging. If you were to ask me, hey, how high does that chain link go on with that chandelier hanging up on the ceiling? And I were to tell you, well, there is no ceiling. There's just an infinite span of chain links that just go on and on and on infinitely. And they're not attached to anything. There's no starting point. Again, you would just intuitively observe that that's absurd. It makes no sense. Or, if you're standing looking at a patch of dominoes falling by in front of you, and you said, wow, that stretch of dominoes is so long. Where did it start? When did it start falling over? And I said to you, oh, it never started falling over. Just for all infinity, this span of dominoes has just been falling over one after the other after the other. The one before it caused it, and the one before it caused it, and the one before it caused it. But there was never a first domino, and nothing like the wind or a finger or anything pushed the first domino into place to start this whole chain of events. Again, that's just absurd. A third way, funnier way. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Now, some people will say the chicken came first because you need chickens to make eggs. Some people might say the egg came first because you need eggs to make chickens. Some people who are clever and cheeky and want to go a little bit against the grain, might assert that a chicken and an egg first arose at the same time. But surely, no one in their right mind is going to say, well, none of them came first. Chickens have always been coming from eggs that have been coming from chickens that have been coming from eggs that have been coming from chickens that coming from eggs for all eternity. And there's never a first chicken or first egg or first beginning to chickens and eggs. You still can't have an infinite regress of causes. Eventually, you need a first cause, itself uncaused. Or you have an infinite regress of causes, and you have no origin to the universe, no origin to time, and it's just absurd. Not to mention the fact that science plainly says that the universe did in fact have an origin, a beginning, and that it is not eternal. You know, Newton's 3 laws of motion, and one of those laws is objects in motion remain in motion unless acted on by an outside force. Objects at rest remain at rest unless acted on by an outside force. So anything that's moving was put in motion by something. The planets are moving. The entire universe is moving. Therefore, it's very reasonable to say that it was put in motion outside of something. And again, because objects in motion remain in motion unless acted on by an outside force, objects at rest remain at rest unless acted on by an outside force. A planet can't cause itself to move. A ball can't cause itself to move. That first finger has to push the first domino. Something outside of time, outside of space, outside of matter, with intelligence, with will, had to cause the universe to begin to move, to cause the universe to come into being. I can push the ball because I have intelligence. I can intelligently will to move. So you have to either argue that the universe has intelligence, and that's a whole nother can of worms, or that something outside the universe that is spaceless, timeless, immaterial, immensely powerful, immensely intelligent, intelligently caused the universe willfully to come into being from nothing. Now, this big first chunk that we just finished only has to do with the origin of the universe, the creation of the universe. But what of morals? Another reason why God is immensely reasonable and immensely necessary is for morality. Now let me ask you this. Where does morality come from? Where does morality find its source? Please pay close attention to this, because I'm not asking which things are moral or immoral. I'm not asking why is something moral or immoral. I'm not asking, do you believe in morals? I'm not asking, do you have to believe in God in order to be moral? There are plenty of atheists who are decently happy as anyone can be, and plenty of theists who are miserable people. And there are plenty of atheists who are decently good, and plenty of theists who are actually very bad. And I'm not asking, how do you deduce or go about figuring out which things are moral or immoral? I'm asking, where does morality come from? Where does the source of morality originate? Let's just suppose, for the sake of argument, that there is no God, and that the universe, time plus matter plus chance, somehow exploded itself and organized itself from absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Time plus matter plus chance, cold indifference. Where does morality come from? With no God, and again, not belief in God, but with no God, it seems very, very difficult to me to solidly say that anything moral exists at all. We might be very different from the other animals. We might wear clothes and build schools and write symphonies and all of that. But at the end of the day, if there is no God, and all this came about unguided, completely unguided, then we are nothing but an animal. Now, when a mother dog eats its infant to ensure the survival of the larger pups, nobody says that that's immoral. It's strange to us as humans, but that's the way nature goes. You know, there are apes in the jungle that rip each other up, limb from limb. Animals kill other animals. Animals kill and eat their own species all the time. So, why are we to say, how are we to say, that just because that looks icky to us, that when humans do it, it's actually immoral? Again, I'm not saying taboo. I'm not saying uncouth or icky. I'm not saying unpopular. I'm saying actually intrinsically immoral. But why is it immoral? Well, because society said it was immoral. Because cultural norms and values dictate that it was immoral. Okay, but societies change. Cultural norms change because the law says so. Okay, but laws can change. Once upon a time, slavery was quite legal and quite within the moral norm in every culture in the ancient world. So laws change, societies change, cultural norms change. Does that mean right and wrong change? It seems like there's no such thing as right and wrong if it could change from one generation or one cultural norm or one vote to the next. So if it isn't society that causes something, a society might decide what's right or wrong. What about the individual will? The individual will, cultural norms, society, laws, they all fall under the same set of problems, namely that those things are subject to change. And a society might decide that this or that is right or wrong in the context of their cultural moral values, but I think slavery is a good illustration of how society deciding on this rule or this norm or this law is not at all the same thing as saying that this behavior, this action, this choice in and of itself is just intrinsically moral or immoral. Some people will say, well, pain is the decider of what's moral and immoral. Well, if we're just animals, that doesn't work out either, because lions go around killing zebras and elephants and other lions all day. Are we to go and preach to the lions to tell them to stop killing? Natural selection has dictated that carnivores eat meat. Are carnivores intrinsically immoral because they eat meat? That just doesn't make sense. And again, I don't really have to articulate that. So if we just came into existence willy-nilly, how can we say and how should we say that there is any way that humankind is supposed to be? Any way that humankind is supposed to behave? A lion might kill a zebra to eat, but we wouldn't say that the lion murdered the zebra because that's a moral implication. That's a moral crime. A male shark might forcibly copulate with a female, but we wouldn't say that the shark raped the female because, again, rape is a moral crime. But if we're just animals at the end of the day, why should we think that it's any different for us? If we impose morality on ourselves, then we're really being speciesist. We're assuming that we're somehow just better in the same way that a racist or an ageist or a sexist assumes that his or her or its way is just better. We're speciesist. We're just assuming that humans are better and capable of noticing something that animals aren't. Again, this all just sort of falls apart and fails to make sense if we're merely animals. And if the universe just exploded itself into existence from nothing, time plus matter plus chance. That's morality. The only other possibility that I can see is that in the same way that there are laws of physics just sort of intrinsically woven into the fabric of the universe, and they can't help but be there, that there might also arguably be moral laws that are also sort of determined by physics, determined by nature. That's the most reasonable thing that I can conclude. But again, this fails to finally make sense because, ask the physicists, go and read it for yourself, science says that if the universe had exploded in a minutely different way, that the laws of physics would be altogether different. And thus, arguably, the laws of morality could have been altogether different. And so we can't say that a thing is intrinsically moral or immoral because given a slightly different set of circumstances, the outcome would have been very different, whether in terms of the laws of physics or in terms of some hypothetical moral law that is interwoven into existence like the laws of physics. So like the creation of the universe, it seems pretty obvious to me that if morality exists at all, it is not just some opinion that's subject to change, that you need something outside of the universe that dictates whether morality is or is not, what things are moral, where morality has its source. And again, this, when it's timeless, spaceless, immaterial, immensely intelligent, immensely powerful, and the arbiter and source of that which is moral, it starts to sound more and more like a god. Now, what about meaning and hope? Anyone can give their life a meaning, but if there is a God who sovereignly exists and sovereignly creates and destroys as he sees fit, you never had to exist, but God willed that you exist. And simply because God is the supreme intelligence of the universe, if you exist, you have meaning. If you exist, you have value. Period. Dot. No explanation needed. But if time, plus matter, plus chance, is all there is, and we resulted from cold indifference, it seems hard to argue that we have any ultimate meaning or value or purpose or hope. We might give ourselves meaning, like that kid works hard because he wants to win the baseball game, so he goes out and trains, but that's his relative meaning, relative to his existence and his own proclivities or opinions or feelings or whatever. I don't mean to sound cold or harsh, but Hitler wanted to extinguish the Jews, and perhaps that gave his life a lot of meaning and purpose. You want to end world hunger, you want to end cancer, okay, fine. But you want to enslave the human race or you want to eat your own crap, I mean, if we just exploded into existence and there's nothing guiding us, nothing greater than or outside of ourselves gives us hope or meaning or purpose, then what difference does it make whether you're Hitler, whether you're Mother Teresa, or whether we are a species of Hitlers or species of Mother Teresas? In the end, we die, and it's just cold, dark dirt, and existence stops. What difference does it make whether we started all wars or ended all wars? It's all just cold, dark dirt in the end. What difference does it make whether any human beings were ever here at all? It's all just cold, dark dirt in the end. And so in addition to the creation of the universe and the sustaining of the universe, and in addition to morality itself, it seems incredibly reasonable that if we just poofed into existence, that we don't have ultimate meaning, we don't have ultimate value, we don't have ultimate purpose, and therefore we don't have ultimate hope. And I'm not just making this up. Read Camus, read Jean-Paul Sartre, read a number of atheist philosophers who actually conclude this same thing. So I'm wrapping it up, and again, I would say that the hiddenness of God is something that atheists and theists ultimately share. We don't know with absolute certainty whether or not there is a God, and I believe that this is part of the will of God. I do believe that faith is an integral part of God's plan, but I hope I've demonstrated at least that faith and blind faith are not the same thing. That faith and science, that faith and philosophy, that faith and reason are not at all at odds with one another. As Catholics, we say, truth can't contradict truth. The God of history, the God of the Bible, is the God of philosophy, is the God of reason, is the God of science. The reason why the scientific world and the world of rational inquiry make sense and have intelligibility is because they come from intelligence in the end. So that's it for today. In parts 2, 3, and 4, we're going to explore the goodness of mankind, the brokenness of mankind, and the bottom line. So please, please, please leave a comment. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what you liked, what you disagreed with, what you hated, what you didn't understand, what you'd like to hear more of, or any other questions you have, any other future video topics, and I hope to address them sooner rather than later. I'm Matthew Bateman, and this is the New Old Catholic Family. Thanks for watching.